So I'm going to give you an example, ripped from the news headlines. Y'all have all heard of Google Books, right? All right. And you guys have probably seen the recent kerfuffle, as a friend of mine from grad school used to say, about the Google Books settlement and how that was been thrown out by a federal judge and all that sort of stuff. Google Books is a great example of the possibilities and the challenges that we face moving forward as a university, in part because Google is defining a lot of these issues for us without us being a part of the conversation. But for anybody who doesn't know, Google is trying to digitize literally everything that has ever been published. I love them, they're very not ambitious. It started in 2004, and within a year they'd already digitized 1 million books. By 2008, they were up to about 8 million. Last year, supposedly they were between 10 and 12, and the last I heard, they were up to 15 million volumes. 15 million volumes. And their goal, of course, is to digitize literally everything that's ever been published. What would you do as a scholar? Rock back in your chair for a second and imagine what would you do if you had the accumulated knowledge of all of mankind at your fingertips? The fabled Library of Alexandria, but literally right there available to you. What in your field could you ask that you could not ask before? What would you do that you couldn't do before? You could possibly ask bigger, more profound questions than has ever been possible by a sheer volume of information available to you. Here's the catch. Our traditional methods of scholarship, particularly in the humanities, I can speak from history, where I spend my time, cannot do this. Why? Because you cannot read 15 million books. It is quite literally impossible. If you read a book, think about this, if you read a book a day for every day of your entire life, it would take you 30 lifetimes to read 1 million books, which is a 15th of what Google has already digitized. It takes machines to be able to process this kind of scale and this breadth of information on the level that we need to approach. So what we need to do, in many ways, is build new tools and new technologies that will allow us to sift things in ways that we never have before, to find those patterns on a large scale so that we can understand what they have to say and what we can possibly do with it. And the rewards are going to be, I think, pretty amazing. I mean, we'll have new abilities to answer questions that are, no one's ever asked before, and nobody is doing this, except for a handful of folks. And they're getting enormous amounts of recognition for it. The field is wide open right now for someone to claim this, for a university to claim this. And I'll give you an example, going with Google Books again. 3 months ago, okay, Science published a new article, January, where a team of scholars, a large interdisciplinary collaborative team came together, and they took a sample of Google Books. They took about 5 million volumes from Google Books. And they decided to basically add up all the words in there, measure language associations, and try to measure what can you do with 5 million books and see what you can find out about how the English language, for example, has changed over the centuries. And they did some very basic computational things. They added up all the words. And they compared it to the Oxford English Dictionary, which is considered the standard. You know what they found? The Oxford Dictionary only has about half the words of the English language. We didn't know this because we couldn't add it up. And this is a very basic sort of thing. This is a first foray. But I'll tell you, the response to this has been electric. Okay? It was published in Science, which, by the way, I love the humanities invading the sciences right here. This is just fun. But it was published in the journal. It was made publicly available, free of charge to anybody outside. You don't have to have a university subscription to get a hold of this thing, because of the large-scale interest in it. And so, what it shows, I think, in part, is that the level of recognition and interest in this sort of stuff is out there. There haven't been, however, the brave universities to be able to go out and claim the mantle of what we can do. And this is frankly a problem or a challenge and an opportunity that we have here at UNT, because for some reason most of us don't know this yet, but we have the best digitization lab in the country here at UNT. Bar none. It is fantastic. And they have been digitizing enormous quantities of documents and primary sources across the board, including early Texas newspapers collection. Working with the NEH and the Library of Congress, our libraries digitized close to 500,000 pages of historical newspapers. And they'll be closing in on several tens of millions of words at this point. What could you do? What could you ask with this sort of level of scale of information available to you? What kind of new things could you possibly investigate? And that's the question, as a historian, I want to be able to get to. But here's the trick, as I was saying, I can't do that alone. These skill sets, this level of scale of complexity goes beyond what I do. So my discipline, the humanities, does not really built for collaboration on a general scale. But that's exactly what's required to do this. And I have a very boring schematic here to sort of show what's necessary. But if I'm going to deal with tens of millions of words in historical newspapers, I need to work with computer scientists who work in natural language processing, who can write algorithms that can measure those sorts of associations. I can't do that. I'm bad at math. That's why I'm in history. But the people who work in natural language processing don't know about historical language patterns. They don't know what to measure and what's significant and what isn't, and how language has changed over time. I do. And in the collaboration between the two of us, we can work together to do something on a larger scale than we can do individually. But we still also depend on the library, information sciences, and the College of Information to build those databases, support them long term. This requires a team. But in so doing, we can ask bigger questions and do something more sophisticated than any of us were able to do alone in our disciplines, giving us the opportunity to try out new ideas and build new tools like we were talking about with GIS and things like that to analyze stuff. I'll show you an example. Let's see right out here. Okay, so since I talked to the microphone, I can't go play with it. This is our attempt to start working on this problem with the newspapers, for example. We have taken all the historical newspapers available here at our library, and we have been mining language patterns in there to try to see how they changed over time and space, to see if you could understand how people have discussed history, have discussed ideas, how movement of people has changed over time and space, and try to understand in a more deep level, more computational and data-driven, about what's going on in these newspapers and what they tell us about the human past and the human experience. So this is a schematic, basically, of the content in the newspapers over time, plotted over all the areas in Texas that these newspapers come from. We can measure, what's available between different places over time, and measure different frequencies of information. So I want to know, where is most of the information coming from? I couldn't measure that before. Now, it's not terribly spectacular, but you can then measure levels of scale and try to understand where the dominant information sets are coming from. Something that helps me ask better questions, interrogate my sources better, and then focusing on what's really important for me to study, and therefore answer better questions. And we've been, in doing this out in the forefront. Stanford has asked they're a partner on our project here that's funded by the NEH, to again try out these new ideas and try to build the capability in a digital scholarship to ask and answer and deal with these sorts of questions. So again, what does this mean for UNT? What does this mean for all of us sitting around here? I would argue, and I'm going to argue to you, that this means we have a historic opportunity right now as a university to seize the mantle when it comes to what is going to make a university great in the 21st century, which again is not access to information, but what you instead do with that information and try to build up the skill sets here to be able to seize the opportunities of the problem of scale in the digital age. And we as a university are more equipped to deal with that than almost any across the country. We actually have some of that incredible infrastructure already in place that we have in fact been investing in for a long time that even here we aren't terribly aware of. As I was saying, the library has one of the best digitization labs in the country, bar none. The dean of the library, Martin Halbert, comes from a background in digital scholarship and completely both believes in this stuff and wants to enable the faculty writ large. We have at the College of Information the Texas Center for Digital Knowledge. We have programs built up in information science that are geared specifically towards supporting this kind of work. We have colleagues in the College of Engineering who want to work and collaborate with humanities scholars and folks in College of Arts and Sciences, and it's all already in place. It's all already in place, and all it takes is coordination and seizing that opportunity and having the vision as a university to be able to invest in that. Because the best thing we do have, especially in this college, are scholars who want to ask those new kinds of questions. and bring that kind of recognition to UNT. We have it in history, we have it in political science, we have a large number of folks down there who work in these sorts of things. We have it in linguistics, we have it in geography, we have it all over the place. I think that this is our opportunity to define who we're going to be going forward. That is out there to not be following the wave and not be catching up with anybody, but to lead going to the future and being that university that defines what it really means to be a great research university in the 21st century. Thank you.